Any paper that you and Charles were working on? Tearcoat swamp. Sounds good. Let's go, Liam. Come on.
Before I start with the talk, I want to give you a little bit of an update on the pension and other documents website. I saw Will Graves not too long ago by a teleconference, and he's looking well, and he's still working on the South Carolina audited accounts. And I'm working on Virginia half-pay pensions. In order to get Virginians to sign up for the duration of the war, they had to promise half pay for the rest of their lives, and it has worked. Will and I are now up to about almost 30,000 documents, so the number you have in the bio is a little bit out of date. Precisely 243 years ago, Lord Cornwallis was getting ready to dine with General Washington in Rochambeau at their invitation. It was the tradition you invite the defeated general to dine with you. Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton was preparing to dine alone. No one invited him to share dinner with him. He had to eat a whole humble pie all by himself. As you all know, the fate of Cornwallis and Tarleton at Yorktown was due to numerous battles and skirmishes that happened in South Carolina. Many of them virtually forgotten except by the people in this room. And one of those small skirmishes that's almost forgotten is the one that was at Tearcoat Swamp. I first got interested in this because of a request by our dearly departed Charles Baxley. Charles paid me a very high compliment once of comparing me with his little Yorkshire Terrier. He wasn't talking about my looks, or at least not that exclusively. He said he enjoyed watching the reaction of his Yorkie when he said the word squirrel. And his Yorkie would start barking up the nearest tree. And he said he would get the same reaction from me when he mentioned any little puzzle about the Revolutionary War. And he probably said the same thing about some of you. I know some of you are like that as well. They start barking up the tree when Charles mentioned some interesting puzzle. Well, one day, Charles said he sure would like to have a map of Marion's route to the skirmish of Tearcoat Swamp. This historical marker does an extraordinary job of summarizing the skirmish in a few short words. It happened on October 25th, 1780. Marion had 150 men with him, and at night they had attacked 200 Tories who are under Colonel Samuel Hines. And the troops under Marion suffered no casualties. Most of the times, the troops were either captured or killed or otherwise dispersed. Lord Cornwallis was very apprehensive about losing the British supplies. He was busy plundering on the Santee River. Marion became interested in attacking Times after hearing that Times was trying to recruit militiamen along the forks of the Black River. Forks of the Black River is the large area between the North Branch of Black River and the South Branch, which is just south of where we are now. We are now in the area called Forks of Black River. Marion crossed the PD River, and this depicts the crossing of the PD. And this map is essentially the one that I produced for Charles at his request. Marion was at one of his favorite camps in Crispin's Neck, in the upper right. And Times was in the region of Salem, which is here. We are located about here, or would be on this 1822 map, if we were alive then. During the Colonel Times, some people of Salem and the Fork of Black River had to do duty as His Majesty's subjects. He instantly resolved to break up the party. This is a quotation from William Goodwin James, who was a historian and also the son of Major John James, who was just mentioned, defending himself with a chair. The area of Salem is centered around the Salem Meeting House, and this is the current building of the Salem Black River Presbyterian Church, which is located on the same site. Perhaps Times was camped right on these grounds. This is the map we saw before, and in order to try to map Marion's route to Tearcoat Swamp, I looked at the 1822 map by John Wilson, and this shows the roads that were existing. Oops. I seem to know what people have to go with. These buttons are very small. No, okay.
What map is that?
Oh, okay. Let me go back. This is the 1822 map. Oh, the 1822 map shows roads from Port's Ferry, where Marion crossed, down to Indiantown, and then from Indiantown over to King Street. This is the only major road shown between these points, so I assume Marion must have ridden along those roads. And then from King Street, he rode up to the ferry crossing, the lower crossing of the North Fork of Black River. Here we go again. On a modern map, you can see the same route. There's no modern road now corresponding to the first part of Marion's ride. Small finger. There is still a road from Indiantown over to King Street, and Route 527 more or less corresponds to what may have been Marion's route. This base map is Mills Atlas, surveyed about the same time as the Wilson map, about 1820, and this shows the final stage of Marion's march. William Goodwin James said that Times lay encamped at Tarleton, which we assume was Tearcoat Creek on the Mills Atlas, now called Tearcoat Branch, in the fork of Black River. General Marion crossed at the lower ford, which would be here, on the north branch of the river, at Nelson's plantation. The only Nelson shown on the Mills Atlas is Colonel Samuel Nelson, so I assume Marion followed the road down to Nelson's plantation and then came up this road toward Tearcoat Creek, and times may have been camped somewhere in this area. We'll look at that again a little bit later. Now, the interesting thing is that all of the participants in the skirmish at Tearcoat Creek just referred to it as the fork of Black River. These are pension applicants and Marion himself. The only one who refers to Tearcoat, or Tarleton in this case, is William W. James. But we have to take this seriously because William W. James was the son of Major John James, who was involved in the skirmish, and presumably he heard it from his father. However, Steve Smith and others have done archaeology in the region near Tearcoat Branch and haven't found any evidence of the skirmish there. So I think there's still a possibility that the skirmish may have actually happened farther down in the forks of Black River, and we were an archaeologist looking again. This is the same route mapped on a modern map, and you can see that Marion's approach may have been along what is now the Brewington Road. This is where the historic marker is that showed in the earlier slide, and you can see it's very close to Route 95. Some of you probably went right by there without knowing it. You can't see it from Route 95 as you pass. And this is a closer view on a modern map of the area that seemed like a likely place where times may have camped. Certainly would have been on relatively high, dry ground, as level as possible. So this would be one possible area, and this would be another possible area. And Steve Smith has looked and looked there with covered most of these areas, and again didn't find any indication of the skirmish there. Nevertheless, because William W. James said it was at Tearcoat or Tearcoat Branch, I think it's reasonable to assume that it was somewhere in this area. This is what Tearcoat Branch looks like now. Maybe it was even more swampy in 1780 because a lot of land has been drained for agriculture since then. And this is one of the areas on the south side of Tearcoat Branch that looks like a likely place for times to have camped. One of Marion's soldiers, Lofton R. Merlin, applied for a pension many years later, and he said the loyalists under times had a big dinner cooked, and they took him by surprise. They were whooping and hollowing and were saying they wish they knew where Marion was. They'd make a riddle of his hide. I never read any account of Marion laughing, but I'd like to imagine him trying to stifle his laughter as he heard that. They wish they knew where he was. They'd make a riddle of his hide. Well, we made them fly and took their dinner from them with guns, saddles, and bridles. Some of them ran into the river and got drowned. I'm not going to say a whole lot about the skirmish itself. Paul T. Carter has made an excellent video on YouTube about the skirmish at Tearcoat ranch, and I'll say more about that later and how you can access it. But I do want to show you this next slide, which gives some idea of what it might look like during the nighttime skirmish. You can imagine the loyalists there around the campfire. They've lost their night vision because they've been staring into the fire, and they're silhouetted against the fire. Marion has been waiting in the dark until they are off their guard. And unfortunately, in the confusion, one of the casualties was John Chandler, who was actually a Whig patriot who happened to be in the camp at the time. And the wounds he suffered give some idea of the ferocity of the fighting. He had his right eye shot out, bullet shot through his nose, another through his chin, one lodged in his right shoulder, 5 shot on the right side, also a severe deep wound in the right hip, 3 shot through his right hand, all at the same time. Marion's men often use fucking balls, a ball and some goose shot or bird shot, so this might account for the many wounds inflicted at the time. At daybreak, when they assessed the damage, they found 6 Tories killed, 14 wounded, and they had taken 23 prisoners, including Tynes. Tynes later escaped, and he was recaptured, and he escaped again. And then he gave up because a lot of his men refused to serve with him again, and some of them actually joined Marion. Marion had no casualties and captured many horses and supplies, which is always in need of. And his ranks quickly swelled from 150 he started with to about 200 temporarily, because Marion's men, as you've heard before, tended to show up when there was fighting to be done. Otherwise, they had to go home and defend their families and property. Cornwallis was very unhappy about this. And Lord Rawdon wrote, without any sense of irony, that the dispersion of Colonel Tynes' militia makes Lord Cornwallis apprehensive for the fate of any stores which may at this time be embarked on Santee, and Tarleton will cross the water tomorrow, and his appearance may repress the audacity of the peaty plunderers. Called Marion's men peaty plunderers and worried because they were interfering with their own plundering. Peaty plunder was bad, Santee plunder was good. Tarleton was near Singleton's mill at the time. Matt's still here. Is that one of your, or Mark? Is that one of your Singletons?
I think he left.
Yeah, he's gone. Okay. Maybe Matthew Singleton's mill. I'm not sure. Tarleton went after Marion. And of course, along the way, questioned people about Marion's location. Of course, they would not known. And along the way, he found out that people in the country appear everywhere dark and mysterious. I shall proceed to General Richardson's. And General Richardson being the recently deceased General Richardson, you heard about yesterday from Peggy Peckett. If I get no satisfactory intelligence before I arrive there, I shall take post and destroy the country between there and King Street down to Nelson's Ferry and the Santee Rivers here. Nothing will serve these people but fire and sword. I have to wonder, Carol, what did y'all do to this poor man? Of course, Tarleton didn't find the general, but Dorothy Sinclair Richardson was home, living on the property. I think it's just southeast of the graveyard where General Richardson is buried. This is his current tombstone, recent, of course. Along the way, Tarleton made several attempts to trick Marion into attacking. Tarleton would spread his troops, about 400 of them in small bands, trying to trick Marion into thinking that it was only a small force, that they were within distance of each other to come to the aid of any group that might be attacked. Tarleton thought he had Marion at one time on the 7th of October. But he was warned off, as you heard yesterday, by Mrs. Richardson, and perhaps some other treacherous women. So Marion, being warned off, retreated. Now, according to William W. James, Marion retreated as far as Benbow's Ferry on the White River up here. It's usually said that Marion hid in Ox Swamp, which is just to the west or east and south of us. Again, we have to take William W. James a little bit seriously here because he did have access to his father's account of what happened. Tarleton gave up the chase at Ox Swamp. And it's usually said it was, this is the same route on a modern map. Marion's retreat was partially across what is now Route 261, just east of here. And Tarleton's pursuit was along what's now Governor Richardson Road, where Mrs. Richardson's house was. And then he said he went down as far as Jack's Creek, and then there was a road in the 1820s that went up to Ox Swamp. There's no road corresponding to this at present. And this is a picture of Ox Swamp taken from Route 521 as you come into town. Now, according to William W. James, Tarleton said, in quotations, "Come, my boys, let us go back and we will soon find the gamecock," meaning Sumter, but for this damn old fox, the devil himself could not catch him. And of course, you should wonder, how did William W. James know what Tarleton's exact words were? He must have got a good tape recorder. This is often said to be the origin of the nickname Swamp Fox, but again, the whole thing is very doubtful. Actually, the reason Tarleton gave up his pursuit was that he was ordered to by Cornwallis. Sumter was advancing towards 96, which always made Cornwallis nervous. And so Cornwallis ordered Tarleton to come back without losing any time. You will lose no time in returning to me. However, Tarleton did lose some time because as he was returning toward Singleton Mill, laid the houses and plantations of violent rebels waste about Richardson's and Jack's Creek. Now, this is, by the way, is how I know the route that Tarleton took in pursuit of Marion, because Tarleton said he retraced his path from Jack's Creek up to Singleton's. The country seems now convinced of the error of insurrection. I don't think so. I mentioned before that Paul T. Carter has done a video on the skirmish at Tearcoat Swamp, and he has a YouTube channel called @Carter on Conflict, in which he talks about all kinds of conflicts. He has several on the Vietnam War. He has one on Blackstock's plantation, one on cow pens. And among the other conflicts he talks about is dating in Southeast Asia. This gives you some idea of his background. If you are masochistic and want to read more about the skirmish and Tarleton's pursuit with footnotes and documentation, I have a paper on it at academia.edu, and again, the video by Paul Carter is at Carter on Conflict YouTube. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you might have. I'm hard of hearing, so be sure to get the microphone to whoever asks a question. Thank you all.
Question. Did Marion pursue Tarleton on his way back?
No. Marion, in simple fashion, you went to retreat. And I'm not sure exactly where you went, but I think you did go back to President's Neck. Somebody certainly know where you went after that. No, whether he camped at Snow's Island at this time or not, I don't think he did. This was soon after he had retreated into North Carolina, and so I don't think he had really settled on a more or less permanent campsite at the time. Seems like anything else?
Leon, did you reconnoiter these routes?
Yes. As far as I could, of course, I stayed on the road. But I did take the photographs that I showed there. And most of you can, if you're from out of town and haven't seen these sites before, it's a good opportunity. They're really very beautiful places.
Hey, Leon, did you check Google Earth for those roads that you said were missing?
I'm pretty sure I did. It's been a couple of years since I researched this, but it's something I routinely do.
You do, yeah.
And also LiDAR, to try to see if I could find any old traces of the roads, and I couldn't find any.
When you took your pictures of Tearcoat Creek, do you think that's a similar depiction of the way it would have looked when they were trying to traverse that area?
That's hard to say. I do think a lot of swamps have been drained, more or less. And at the time I took this picture, I think it was last year, I think it was unusually dry, if I remember correctly. So it was probably more swampy at the time.
After the war, Samuel Tynes seems to have made his peace with Thomas Sumter. At least he went into a business partnership with Sumter, and then disappeared. I think he found things a little too hot around High Hills for him. Do you, or does anyone here know what happened to Tynes after he left the area? I've been tracking him and I lost track.
I didn't even know he went into partnership with Sumter. That's news to me.
It was a store.
No. Anybody?
I also heard from the families, the Nelsons, the Durants, and all still live in that area on that land. And they told me that the place where the skirmish took place was actually a muster station, and that people would go there to practice shooting and also a muster area. So that was an area that obviously, to answer our question, might have been a little bit more cleared out and able, more accessible for them to encamp. But it would have been by the water, too.
Yeah, well, it would have to be by water for the horses at least. That would be a good place to send an archaeologist, it sounds like.
Sounds like there'll be bullets there.
Leon and Harriet, we've had the archaeologists up there near where the sign is. And as best anybody can figure out, that area back there, which would have been on the creek, and there's actually 3 branches of the creek, so we don't know which branches they're really talking about. But that area was used as fill dirt for I-95. And so we have no idea exactly. The archaeologists couldn't find anything, and they looked far and wide. So if anybody else has other research. The other thing, did you speak about Paul? Do you want to tell them about your connection to Tearcoat? Paul Graham is from the other side of Lake City. Did you mention that? And they think that the prisoners were taken over there. He found some records.
Yes, Paul Graham has some very interesting anecdotes about that.
And where we're talking about is about 10 miles just straight north of here up 301.
Can you hear me? I'm not used to speaking, to be honest with you, so we'll do the best I can here. I've enjoyed this educational thing for myself because I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I inherited our farm about 15 years ago, and I went up to my granduncle's attic, who owned the farm since the early 1900s, and found all these artifacts and letters and colonial furniture and French and Indian War artifacts. It was just crazy. So anyway, it's been my passion to figure out why do I own this farm, and what would happen. So I was going to look up real quick, if you give me some patience here. One of the first things I found was a letter from Marion to Gates referencing Tearcoat Swamp, which matched a receipt from my 5th grade grandfather, Hugh Graham, which I'm not going to be able to pull it up that quick, but it basically says on November 10th, 1780, we provided dinner for 11 men carrying prisoners on their way to General Harrington in Cheraw. And that was dated November 10th, 1780, which is right after the Battle of Tearcoat Swamp. So there's a connection there, and we've been researching it for about 15 years. So I can embellish a little bit on what they were talking about earlier. For instance, first of all, there was a man named Amos Gaskin who had been considered the devil because he was a loyalist, and he was pointing out who the rebels were with Colonel Weems, who was, as they were talking about yesterday, had been burning large swaths of this area looking for rebels. Well, Amos Gaskin was the guy who was pointing out who the rebels were. And he was called back to Charleston, and in his place was Colonel Tynes. And Colonel Tynes had fresh horses, fresh saddles, new brown buses, and he and his men were trying to recruit replacements for Weems and his men. He was looking for loyalists. And they were pretty rough on these guys. They were really trying to force them to play, to be on their side. And Marion had heard about that. It actually ends up, I don't know, I can't prove that this is the way it happened, but my sixth great grandfather's brothers lived right there at Tearcoat Swamp on that fork there. And so there's a good chance that they may have helped him know what was happening. But so anyway, they went out to the to attack them, and there's an article I have also about Amos. There's a lot of people who hated Amos Gaskin for what he was doing, and so he was going to help Tynes find more rebels, and Colonel Marion wanted to put an end to that. So he was one of the persons of the 4 people they killed. He was definitely one of those guys. In fact, I have an article where he was one of the persons playing cards, and he still had his cards in his hands or something, something to that effect. Also, Tynes got away with some of his junior officers, and so he sent out Captain Snipes, and Snipes looked for him for 2 weeks. He caught Colonel Tynes, he caught his junior officers. He also picked up a couple of justices of the peace who were loyalists. And those are the prisoners that came back to the farm about 2 weeks later. And Captain Snipes wanted a promotion for the job he did. And Marion wasn't real happy about it. Snipes didn't like him, I don't think. And Ori didn't want to give him a promotion either. So he went to Sumter. He went to Sumter to see if he could get a promotion to major through, serving for Sumter. And Sumter said, yes, I'll give you a promotion as long as you get your own men. You muster your own men, and you can have a promotion. Well, so he did that, and about a year later, he went to his plantation after, I think he was taking a rest between skirmishes, and the Queens Rangers had come down from New York up through Charleston and attacked Colonel Tynes. Captain Major Snipes at that point, his plantation. And he had 21 men, and I believe only 18, or 3 lived, 18 perished in that skirmish. They got him by surprise. So he did live, though. He was one of the people who lived, Snipes. And I was talking to Karen McNutt about that a little bit, and she thought there might be some underlying things about that, somebody might have let him kind of know that he was there alone on the plantation, and I don't know. If you want to embellish on that, you can do that.
This is what you call fantasy time, because there is absolutely no definitive knowledge. But Snipes and Marion didn't get along because Snipes waged war in a way Marion didn't like. He was a barn burner and the whole 9 yards, plunderer, and he was arrogant, with Marion, which is why he ended up going over to Sumter, and he got some of his men by promising them plunder, and he took recruits that were supposed to go to Marion. So there's a lot of hard feeling, and at some point, Snipes writes a very snotty letter to Marion, somewhat like, if you want me, you come find me. And within about a week or two, the Queens Rangers find Snipes and puts an end to his military career. And Snipes ends up crawling back to Marion's camp. But, and I always wondered whether, that was a very convenient thing that the Queens Rangers found out where Snipes was, and particularly after the snotty letter to Marion. But that's, as I say, fantasy, and your imagination can take you wherever you want to go, because much of this stuff will always remain on the street.
Anyway, we'd like to invite you out to the American Heritage Festival. It's February 15th and 16th. If you look on a map, it's very interesting. Tearcoat Swamp is to the west. Across is Lake City, where our farm is. We're two miles out of that. And we're in a tributary of the PD River. The next stop would be Johnsonville, and then Snow Island. So you can see how he would have gone through the back of our farm and to bring these prisoners or to rest. We do have documents of him saying he's leaving Mr. Grimes' farm to attack Georgetown and other documents. So we'd love to show them to you, and hopefully you'll come out to see us. Thank you.
Any questions for Leon or Karen?